The smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air when Zara Garrett stumbled through the saloon doors of Sweetwater, Texas. Her worn leather satchel clutched against her chest, and a bullet grazed bleeding through the sleeve of her dusty travel dress. It was late August in 1878, and the unforgiving sun had turned the main street into a ribbon of heat that shimmered and danced. But Zara barely noticed as she pressed herself against the wooden wall inside, trying to catch her breath and praying the three men who had been following her since El Paso had finally lost her trail. The saloon fell silent as every eye turned toward her. A woman alone, disheveled and bleeding, was enough to draw attention in any frontier town, but Zara had grown accustomed to stares during her desperate journey westward. She scanned the room quickly, looking for another exit, when her gaze locked with a pair of startling blue eyes that belonged to a tall man standing at the bar. He was perhaps 26 or 27 years old, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that touched his collar beneath a well-worn Stetson. His hand rested casually near the revolver at his hip, and something in his expression shifted from curiosity to concern as he took in her bloodied sleeve. "You all right, miss?" His voice carried across the room, deep and steady, cutting through the uncomfortable silence. Before Zara could answer, the saloon doors burst open again, and she recognized the harsh voice of Marcus Brennan, the man who had been hunting her for 3 weeks. "Anyone seen a dark-haired woman come through here? About 23, 24 years old, carrying a bag." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. The satchel contained documents that could destroy Marcus and his corrupt business partners back in St. Louis, evidence of fraud and murder that her late brother had died trying to expose. She had promised Samuel on his deathbed that she would finish what he started, but she had not anticipated just how dangerous that promise would become. The tall cowboy at the bar straightened slowly, his body language shifting into something protective and alert. "Plenty of folks pass through Sweetwater," he said, his tone mild but his eyes hard. "Might help if you told us why you are looking for her." Marcus stepped further into the saloon, flanked by his 2 hired guns. Zara recognized the cold calculation in his eyes, the same look he had worn when he had threatened her in St. Louis, telling her that accidents happened to women who did not know their place. "That is my business," Marcus said. "Now, I will ask one more time." The cowboy took a deliberate step away from the bar, positioning himself between Marcus and the rest of the room, between Marcus and Zara. "And I will tell you one more time, friend, this is a peaceful town. Sheriff Dawson does not take kindly to men coming in here making threats and waving guns around." "I have not drawn my weapon," Marcus said, but his hand hovered near his holster. "Not yet," the cowboy agreed, "but I am real good at reading intentions, and yours are written all over your face." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Zara knew she should slip out the back while attention was focused elsewhere, but her legs felt rooted to the floor. She watched the cowboy with a mixture of gratitude and fear, wondering why a stranger would risk himself for someone he did not even know. Finally, Marcus seemed to recognize that he was outnumbered. The other men in the saloon had quietly shifted positions, hands moving toward their own weapons in subtle support of the local cowboy. With a frustrated grunt, Marcus turned on his heel. "This is not over," he said, shooting one last searching glance around the room before stalking back out into the blazing afternoon heat. The moment the doors swung shut behind him, the cowboy crossed the room in 3 long strides and gently took Zara's elbow. "Back room," he said quietly. "Now, before they decide to watch the exits." Zara let him guide her through a narrow doorway and into a small storage area that smelled of whiskey and tobacco. Her knees went weak with relief and delayed shock, and she sank onto a wooden crate, pressing one hand against her wounded arm. The cowboy crouched in front of her, his expression concerned as he carefully pushed back her torn sleeve to examine the injury. "Bullet just grazed you," he said, his touch surprisingly gentle for such calloused hands. "But it needs cleaning and binding. My name is Lucas Whitmore. I work a ranch about 5 miles outside of town, but I also help the sheriff when things get complicated. And unless I miss my guess, things just got real complicated." "Zara Garrett," she managed, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts to sound composed. "Thank you. You did not have to do that. Could not very well let 3 armed men terrorize a wounded woman," Lucas said simply. He pulled a relatively clean handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it gently against her arm. "Hold that there. I am going to get Doc Morrison. He keeps an office 2 doors down." "No," Zara said quickly, grabbing his wrist with her free hand. "They will be watching. If you bring anyone here, they will know where I am." Lucas studied her face for a long moment, and Zara had the unsettling feeling that he could see straight through her carefully constructed walls into the fear and desperation she was trying so hard to hide. "Those men are not going to give up easy, are they?" "No," she admitted quietly. "They are not. Then I reckon you are going to need somewhere safe to stay while we figure out what to do about them." He stood, offering her his hand. "My ranch is not fancy, but it is defensible, and Marcus Brennan will not find you there. Can you ride?" "Yes," Zara said, though in truth she had not been on a horse in years. But she would learn to fly if it meant escaping Marcus and his men. Lucas helped her to her feet, keeping a steadying hand at her elbow. "The stable is out back. If we are quick and quiet, we can be gone before anyone notices." True to his word, Lucas moved with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, Zara found herself astride a gentle mare named Daisy, with her precious satchel secured across her body. Lucas mounted his own horse, a powerful chestnut stallion, and led them out through the back alleys of Sweetwater, avoiding the main street where Marcus and his men were likely watching. The ride to the Whitmore ranch took nearly an hour, and by the time the cluster of buildings came into view, Zara's arm was throbbing and she was light-headed from the heat and blood loss. The ranch was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy 2-story house, a large barn, and several corrals holding cattle and horses. An older man with gray hair and a weathered face stepped out onto the porch as they approached, his expression curious. "Lucas, who is your friend?" "This is Miss Zara Garrett, Pa. She ran into some trouble in town. I told her she could stay here for a bit." Lucas dismounted and came around to help Zara down from her horse, catching her easily when her legs nearly buckled. "Easy now, I have got you." The older man, whom Lucas introduced as his father James Whitmore, took one look at Zara's pale face and bloodied sleeve and immediately ushered them inside. The house was cool and clean, with simple furniture and curtains that fluttered in the breeze from the open windows. James disappeared into what Zara assumed was the kitchen while Lucas guided her to a settee in the front room. "Let me take a proper look at that arm," Lucas said, kneeling beside her again. His hands were steady as he carefully removed the makeshift bandage and examined the wound more thoroughly. "It is not deep, but it is going to hurt for a few days. Pa keeps medical supplies for when the ranch hands get injured. I have patched up worse than this." Zara watched his face as he worked, noting the concentration in his eyes and the firm but gentle way he handled her arm. There was something inherently trustworthy about Lucas Whitmore, something that made her want to believe she was finally safe after weeks of running and hiding. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. "You do not know anything about me or what I am involved in." Lucas glanced up, meeting her gaze. "I know that you are scared and hurt and being hunted by men who mean you harm. That is all I need to know right now. The rest you can tell me when you are ready." James returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a small wooden box filled with bandages and medical supplies. He set everything down on the table beside Lucas without comment, though his sharp eyes assessed Zara with the same steady competence she had noticed in his son. "I will put on some coffee," James said. "You look like you could use something to eat as well, Miss Garrett." "Thank you," Zara said softly. "And please call me Zara." As Lucas cleaned and bandaged her wound, Zara found herself studying the room around her. There were no feminine touches, no curtains with lace trim or decorative dishes on display. Pictures on the mantel showed Lucas and James with a woman who bore a strong resemblance to both of them, her smile warm and her eyes kind. The newest photo appeared to be several years old. "My mother passed 4 years ago," Lucas said, following her gaze. "Fever took her one winter. It has been just Pa and me since then, running the ranch and trying to keep things going." "I am sorry," Zara said, meaning it. She knew the ache of loss too well, having buried her own mother at age 16 and her beloved brother just 2 months ago. "Life on the frontier is hard," Lucas said simply, tying off the bandage with practiced hands. "But we endure, we adapt, we find reasons to keep going." He sat back on his heels, giving her a small smile that softened the serious lines of his face. "There, that should hold for now. I will want to check it again tomorrow, make sure it is not getting infected." "Lucas," Zara began, then hesitated. The urge to trust him warred with the caution that had kept her alive this long. "The men looking for me, they are dangerous. If they find out I am here, they will not hesitate to hurt you or your father. Maybe I should keep moving, head further west." "And go where?" Lucas asked reasonably. "You are in no condition to ride hard, and those men will be watching the roads out of town. Besides," he added, something fierce flickering in his eyes, "I am not in the habit of letting bullies chase people out of my territory. You are safe here, Zara. I give you my word." Something in the way he said it, with such quiet certainty, made Zara's throat tighten with emotion. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of her brother's last wish and the fear of Marcus's pursuit without anyone to share the burden. To have someone simply offer protection without demanding explanations or asking for anything in return felt almost too good to be true. "I have evidence," she heard herself saying. "Documents that prove Marcus Brennan and his partners have been stealing from their investors and covering up murders. My brother worked as a clerk in their office in St. Louis. He discovered what they were doing and tried to go to the authorities, but Marcus has half the police force in his pocket. Samuel was killed before he could get the evidence to the federal marshals. He gave the documents to me before he died and made me promise to finish what he started." Lucas listened intently, his expression growing more serious as she spoke. "So you have been running for 2 months with evidence that could hang these men?" "Yes," Zara confirmed. "I managed to send word to the federal marshal's office in Austin before I left Missouri. I was supposed to meet Marshal Thompson in Sweetwater 3 days ago, but he never showed up. I do not know if he received my message or if something happened to prevent him from coming. I have been hiding in town, trying to figure out my next move when Marcus and his men found me." "Marshal Thompson is a good man," Lucas said thoughtfully. "If he got your message, he would have come. Something must have delayed him. The telegraph office might have information about when he is expected to arrive." "I cannot go back into town," Zara said. "Not with Marcus watching for me. No, but I can." Lucas stood, stretching his long frame. "I will ride back tomorrow, talk to the sheriff and check on the marshal's whereabouts. In the meantime, you are going to rest and let that arm heal. Pa will keep an eye on you while I am gone." James returned with coffee and a plate of bread, cheese, and cold meat. Zara realized with a start that she had not eaten since early morning, and her hands shook slightly as she accepted the food. The simple act of sitting in a safe place, eating without looking over her shoulder, felt almost surreal. As the afternoon wore into evening, Lucas showed Zara to a small bedroom upstairs that had clearly belonged to his mother. The room was neat and feminine, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and a washstand in the corner. Clean clothes had been laid out, simple but well made, and Zara felt tears prick her eyes at the kindness of it all. "These were my mother's," Lucas said quietly from the doorway. "Pa has been keeping her things, but I think she would be glad to know they were helping someone who needed them. You are about the same size. If you need anything else, just call out. Pa and I will be downstairs." "Lucas," Zara said as he turned to leave, "thank you for everything." He paused, looking back at her with those striking blue eyes that seemed to see too much. "You do not need to thank me for doing what is right, Zara. Get some rest. Things will look clearer in the morning." After he left, Zara carefully washed herself with the water in the basin, changed into a clean nightgown, and sank onto the bed. Her body was exhausted, but her mind would not stop racing. She thought about her brother Samuel, about his earnest belief that justice would prevail if only the truth could reach the right people. She thought about the long, frightening journey from Missouri to Texas, always looking over her shoulder, always afraid. And she thought about Lucas Whitmore, the cowboy who had stepped between her and danger without hesitation, whose touch had been gentle despite his obvious strength, who offered protection without expecting anything in return. Sleep claimed her eventually, deep and dreamless, and when she woke the sun was streaming through the window and she could smell coffee and bacon drifting up from downstairs. For just a moment, still foggy with sleep, Zara forgot where she was and why. Then reality came rushing back, but somehow it felt less overwhelming in the clear light of morning. She dressed carefully in one of the simple cotton dresses Lucas had provided, a soft blue that matched her eyes, and braided her dark hair over one shoulder. Her arm ached, but the throbbing had lessened, and when she removed the bandage to examine the wound, it looked clean with no signs of infection. Downstairs, she found Lucas and James at the kitchen table, discussing the day's work. They both stood when she entered, and Lucas pulled out a chair for her with old-fashioned courtesy. "How are you feeling?" he asked, studying her face. "Better," Zara admitted. "The sleep helped, and your mother's clothes fit perfectly. Thank you again." James poured her coffee without being asked, his manner gruff but kind. "Lucas is planning to ride into town this morning. He will talk to Sheriff Dawson about your situation, see what can be done about those men hunting you." "I hate putting you in danger," Zara said, looking between the two men. "If Marcus finds out you are helping me, he will come after you too." "Let him try," Lucas said calmly, though there was steel in his voice. "I have dealt with plenty of men who thought they were above the law. They tend to think differently when faced with the consequences of their actions." After breakfast, Zara walked with Lucas out to the barn, watching as he saddled his stallion with efficient movements. The morning air was already warm, promising another scorching day, and the sounds of the ranch waking up filled the air around them. Ranch hands called to each other, cattle lowed in the distance, and somewhere a rooster crowed belatedly. "Be careful," Zara said as Lucas checked his saddle cinch. "Marcus is not like other criminals. He is smart and ruthless, and he has money to buy whatever he needs." Lucas turned to face her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. "I am always careful, but I appreciate your concern." He hesitated, then reached out and gently adjusted the collar of her dress where it had folded awkwardly. The brief touch sent an unexpected warmth through Zara's chest. "Stay close to the house while I am gone." Pa will be working in the north pasture, but he will check on you regularly. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you fire 3 shots from the rifle I left by the back door. We will come running." "I will," Zara promised. She watched him mount up, sitting tall and confident in the saddle, and felt an unfamiliar flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with fear. "Lucas, thank you for believing me." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was both formal and intimate. "I will be back by early afternoon. Try not to worry too much." After he rode away, Zara returned to the house, feeling restless and useless. James had already headed out to work, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She spent some time examining her brother's documents, memorizing names and dates in case something happened to the physical evidence. The papers detailed years of fraud, starting small and growing bolder as Marcus and his partners realized how easy it was to manipulate their investors. Around mid-morning, Zara decided to make herself useful by cleaning the kitchen and preparing food for lunch. It felt good to have something productive to do with her hands, and she found a certain comfort in the domestic routine. She was rolling out dough for biscuits when she heard horses approaching, multiple horses moving fast. Her heart jumped into her throat. Lucas had said he would not return until afternoon, and James was working in the north pasture. Wiping flour from her hands, Zara moved quickly to the window and felt her blood run cold. 3 riders were approaching the house, and even from a distance she recognized Marcus Brennan's distinctive black coat. They had found her. Zara grabbed the rifle from beside the back door and fired 3 shots into the air as Lucas had instructed, praying that James was close enough to hear. Then she barred the back door and ran to the front of the house to do the same. The windows were already shuttered against the heat, which would provide some protection, but Zara knew that if Marcus was determined to get to her, a few locked doors would not stop him for long. "Zara Garrett," Marcus's voice called from outside. "I know you are in there. Come out peacefully, and we can discuss this like civilized people." Zara pressed her back against the wall beside the window, the rifle clutched in shaking hands. She had never shot at another person before, was not even sure she could pull the trigger if it came to that. But the memory of her brother's broken body, of the way Marcus had smiled coldly when she had confronted him about Samuel's death, steadied her resolve. "You killed my brother," she shouted back. "There is nothing civilized about you, Marcus Brennan." "Your brother was a fool who could not mind his own business," Marcus replied, his tone maddeningly conversational. "And you are proving to be just as foolish. Give me the documents, Zara. That is all I want. Give them to me and you can walk away from this. So you can kill me anyway." "I am not stupid, Marcus. Those documents are going to the federal marshal and you and your partners are going to hang for what you have done." There was a long pause, then Marcus's voice turned cold and hard. "Very well. We will do this the difficult way. Boys, burn them out." Zara's heart hammered as she heard the men moving around the house. Through a gap in the shutters, she saw one of Marcus's hired guns approaching the front porch with a lit torch. Without thinking, driven by desperation and fury, Zara shouldered the rifle, aimed carefully, and fired. The bullet struck the torch, sending it flying from the man's hand to land harmlessly in the dirt. The hired gun yelped and stumbled backward, clutching his singed fingers. "The next one goes through your heart," Zara called out, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "She is just one woman," Marcus snarled. "Rush the door. She cannot shoot all of us." But before the men could move, gunfire erupted from a different direction. Zara saw James Whitmore galloping toward the house on horseback, rifle in hand, firing with deadly accuracy. One of Marcus's men went down, clutching his leg and screaming. The other dove for cover behind the water trough. "This is private property," James roared. And you are trespassing. Leave now or face the consequences." Marcus, showing more courage than intelligence, drew his own pistol and fired at James. The older man jerked in his saddle but kept his seat, firing back. Zara saw blood staining James's shirt and felt a surge of rage. These good people were being hurt because of her brother's evidence and Marcus's greed. She threw open the shutters, aimed carefully, and fired again. Her bullet struck the water trough inches from where one of the hired guns was crouching, sending splinters of wood flying. The man made a break for his horse, clearly deciding that whatever Marcus was paying him was not worth dying for. The sound of more hoofbeats drew everyone's attention. Lucas was riding hard toward the ranch, and he was not alone. Sheriff Dawson and 3 deputies rode with him, guns drawn. Marcus took one look at the approaching lawmen and cursed viciously. "This is not over, Zara," he shouted, mounting his horse. "I will find you wherever you go." "You are not going anywhere, Brennan," Sheriff Dawson called out, spurring his horse forward. "Except to jail." What followed was a tense standoff that lasted only minutes but felt like hours. Marcus's remaining hired gun, wounded and abandoned, surrendered immediately. Marcus himself tried to make a run for it, but Lucas cut him off, his stallion moving with trained precision to block the escape route. For a moment, Zara thought Marcus would try to shoot his way out, but faced with 4 lawmen and Lucas Whitmore, even he had enough sense to recognize defeat. Zara stumbled out of the house as the deputies secured Marcus and his men in handcuffs. Her eyes went immediately to James, who was being helped down from his horse by Lucas. Blood soaked the older man's upper arm, but he was conscious and steady. "I am fine," James was saying gruffly. "Bullet just grazed me. I have had worse." "You need a doctor," Lucas insisted, his face tight with concern. "I am fine," James repeated, then his eyes found Zara. "You all right, girl? They did not hurt you?" "No," Zara managed, her voice shaking. "But you were hurt because of me. I am so sorry. I should never have brought this danger to your home." "Nonsense," James said firmly. "You did not bring this danger. Those men did. You just had the misfortune of getting caught up in their wickedness." Sheriff Dawson approached, a tall man in his 50s with a graying mustache and shrewd eyes. "Miss Garrett, I am Sheriff Tom Dawson. Lucas told me about your situation. I have already wired the federal marshal's office in Austin. Marshal Thompson was delayed by a train robbery but is expected to arrive in Sweetwater tomorrow. He will want to see those documents you have been protecting." "Of course," Zara said, relief flooding through her. "They are inside. I will get them." "Not so fast," Sheriff Dawson said, holding up a hand. "First, I need to hear the whole story from the beginning. And you," he added, looking at James's bloodied arm, "need to see Doc Morrison." Lucas took charge with quiet efficiency. He dispatched one of the ranch hands to fetch the doctor, got his father settled in a chair on the porch with a glass of whiskey, and then guided Zara back inside to retrieve the documents. His hand on her elbow was steady and warm, anchoring her as the adrenaline began to fade and reaction set in. "You did well," he said quietly as they climbed the stairs to her room. "That was real courage, standing up to them like that." "I was terrified," Zara admitted. "When I saw them coming, I thought it was over. I thought they would burn down your house and kill everyone here because of me." "But they did not," Lucas pointed out. "You defended yourself. You held them off until help could arrive. And now Marcus Brennan and his men are going to face justice for what they have done." In her room, Zara retrieved the satchel from where she had hidden it under the bed. Lucas waited patiently while she carefully removed the documents, checking that everything was still in order. Her hands were shaking, she noticed distantly, and there was flour still dusted across her dress from when she had been making biscuits. It seemed impossible that less than an hour ago she had been engaged in something so mundane and peaceful. "Zara," Lucas said softly. When she looked up at him, his blue eyes were warm with concern. "You are safe now. It is over." That was when the tears came, sudden and overwhelming. Zara pressed one hand over her mouth, trying to hold back the sobs, but they came anyway. All the fear and grief and loneliness of the past 2 months came pouring out in great shuddering gasps. She cried for her brother, for the life she had lost in St. Louis, for the terror of being hunted, and for the sheer relief of knowing it was finally over. Lucas did not hesitate. He set the documents carefully aside and pulled Zara into his arms, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other wrapped securely around her waist. He did not try to shush her or tell her everything would be fine. He just held her, solid and strong, while she fell apart against his chest. "I have got you," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe, I have got you." Eventually the storm passed, leaving Zara exhausted and embarrassed. She pulled back slightly, wiping at her tear-stained face. "I am sorry. I did not mean to fall apart like that." "You have been holding yourself together for 2 months," Lucas said, tilting her chin up gently so she had to meet his eyes. "I would be more worried if you had not eventually broken down. There is no shame in tears, Zara." They stood there for a long moment, close enough that Zara could feel the warmth of his body and smell the scent of leather and sage that clung to him. Something flickered between them, a connection that went beyond gratitude or circumstance. Then Lucas cleared his throat and stepped back, though his expression remained soft. "We should get these documents to the sheriff," he said. "The sooner Marshal Thompson sees them, the sooner this whole business can be put to rest properly." The rest of the day passed in a blur of statements and explanations. Doc Morrison arrived to tend to James's wound, declaring it superficial but insisting on proper cleaning and bandaging. Sheriff Dawson took possession of the documents, giving Zara a receipt and promising that they would be secured in his safe until the federal marshal arrived. Marcus Brennan and his men were transported to the jail in Sweetwater, and word was sent ahead to Austin about their capture. By evening, when the last of the officials had finally departed, Zara found herself sitting on the porch with Lucas and James, watching the sun paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. James's arm was properly bandaged, and he seemed in good spirits despite the day's excitement. Lucas sat on the porch rail, one booted foot propped on the lower rung, his gaze distant as he watched the horizon. "I reckon you will be heading back to Missouri once this business is settled," James said, breaking the comfortable silence. Zara considered the question. She had not really thought beyond getting the documents to the authorities and seeing Marcus brought to justice. The idea of returning to St. Louis, to the house she had shared with Samuel, to the life that had been shattered by corruption and murder, held no appeal. "There is nothing for me in Missouri anymore," she said slowly. "My brother was the only family I had left. The house, such as it is, can be sold to pay his debts. I have been thinking that maybe I should start fresh somewhere new." "Texas is not a bad place for starting fresh," Lucas observed, his tone carefully neutral. "Plenty of opportunities for someone willing to work hard." "What kind of work could I do?" Zara asked. "I can read and write and do figures. I kept house for my brother and did some sewing for the neighbors. But I do not know if those skills translate well to frontier life." "Sweetwater is growing," James said. "Always need teachers, shopkeepers, people with a head for business. And ranches are always looking for folks who can keep books and manage accounts. Lucas and I could use someone to help with the paperwork side of running this place. We are better with cattle than with ledgers, truth be told." Zara glanced at Lucas, trying to read his expression. "Would you really want me to stay?" He met her gaze directly, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I think you should do what makes you happy, Zara. But yes, if you chose to stay in Sweetwater, I would be glad of it." Before she could respond, James stood with a grunt, stretching carefully to avoid pulling his injured arm. "I am heading to bed. All this excitement has worn me out. Zara, you are welcome to stay here as long as you like. Consider this your home for now." After James went inside, Zara and Lucas remained on the porch, the silence between them stretching but not uncomfortable. Crickets sang in the gathering darkness, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. The air had finally cooled to something bearable, carrying the scent of sage and dust. "I meant what I said," Lucas said eventually, "about being glad if you stayed. I know we have only just met and the circumstances have been unusual to say the least, but I find myself hoping you do not leave too quickly." Zara's heart beat faster. "Why?" He smiled, a slow, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "Because I would like the chance to know you better. The real you, not just the brave woman running from danger. I would like to know what makes you laugh, what your dreams are, what you think about when you watch the sunset. I would like to court you properly if you would allow it." "Court me," Zara repeated, startled by his directness. "Is that so surprising?" Lucas asked, tilting his head. "You are intelligent, courageous, and beautiful. You have a good heart and a strong will. Why would I not want to court you?" "Because we barely know each other," Zara said, though her pulse was racing. "Because a few days ago I was a stranger who brought trouble to your door. And now you are a woman I admire who deserves happiness after everything she has been through," Lucas countered. He moved to sit beside her on the porch steps, close but not touching. "I am not asking you to make any decisions tonight, Zara. I am just telling you my intentions, being honest about what I am feeling. The rest is up to you." Zara studied his profile in the fading light, taking in the strong line of his jaw and the earnest expression in his eyes. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grasp at this unexpected chance for happiness. But another part, the part that had learned to be cautious through hard experience, held back. "I do not know if I am ready for courting," she said honestly. "My whole life has been turned upside down. I am not sure who I am anymore or what I want." "Then take your time to figure it out," Lucas said simply. "I am a patient man, Zara. I can wait while you find your footing again. All I ask is that you give Texas a fair chance. Give Sweetwater a fair chance. And maybe, if you are willing, give me a fair chance too." She found herself smiling despite the emotional turmoil of the day. "That seems reasonable." "Good," Lucas said, standing and offering her his hand. "Now come on inside. Tomorrow is going to be another long day with the marshal arriving and you need rest." That night, lying in the comfortable bed in the room that had belonged to Lucas's mother, Zara found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. Her mind kept replaying the events of the past few days, from the terror of being hunted to the safety of the Whitmore ranch, from Marcus's capture to Lucas's unexpected declaration. It felt like her entire world had shifted on its axis, and she was still trying to find her balance. She thought about Samuel and the promise she had made to him. By tomorrow, when Marshal Thompson took possession of the documents, that promise would be fulfilled. Justice would finally be served. But what came after that? What did she do with a future she had never really expected to have? The memory of Lucas's arms around her, strong and comforting as she fell apart, rose unbidden in her mind. The way he had looked at her with those blue eyes, not with pity but with respect and admiration. The gentle touch of his hands as he had tended her wound. The quiet confidence with which he faced danger to protect those under his care. Could she let herself care for him? Could she trust this feeling growing in her chest, warm and fragile as a new flame? She had never really been courted before. Samuel had been protective, discouraging the few young men in St. Louis who had shown interest, wanting to ensure that any potential suitor was truly worthy. And then the trouble with Marcus had started, and there had been no time or energy for thoughts of romance. But now, lying in the darkness of a Texas night with the knowledge that she was finally safe, Zara allowed herself to wonder, to hope, to imagine what it might be like to build a new life here, to wake up each morning in this wild, beautiful place, and face the challenges of frontier living with Lucas by her side. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Marshall Thompson arrived in Sweetwater late the following morning, a lean man in his 40s with intelligent eyes and an air of uncompromising authority. Lucas escorted Zara into town to meet with him at the sheriff's office, staying close but giving her space to tell her story in her own words. The marshal listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, as Zara walked him through everything that had happened. She explained Samuel's work in Marcus's office, the gradual realization that something was wrong, the evidence her brother had painstakingly gathered. She described Samuel's murder, though it hurt to speak of it, and her desperate flight from St. Louis with Marcus and his men in pursuit. When she finished, Marshal Thompson leaned back in his chair and regarded her with something like awe. "Miss Garrett, you have shown remarkable courage. These documents you have brought me, combined with the testimony you can provide, will be more than enough to convict Brennan and his partners. You have done your brother proud." Zara felt tears sting her eyes again but managed to keep them at bay. "When will the trial be?" "I will need to take Brennan and his men back to Austin for arraignment. Given the severity of the charges and the evidence you have provided, I expect they will be tried within the month. You will need to come to Austin to testify, but I will make sure you have safe escort and accommodation." "I will take her," Lucas said from where he stood by the door. It was not a request. Marshal Thompson glanced between them and a small smile tugged at his mouth. "Very well. I will send word when the trial date is set." He stood, offering Zara his hand. "On behalf of the federal government, Miss Garrett, I thank you for your service to justice. Many people would have simply run, would have destroyed the evidence to protect themselves. Your brother chose you to carry on his work for good reason." After the meeting concluded, Lucas suggested they walk through town rather than riding straight back to the ranch. Sweetwater was bustling with midday activity, the main street crowded with wagons and horses and people going about their business. Lucas pointed out various establishments as they walked. The general store run by a widow named Mrs. Henderson. The schoolhouse where a young teacher from back east struggled with a classroom full of rowdy frontier children. The church where Reverend Walsh preached every Sunday. "That building there," Lucas said, gesturing to a neat structure with large windows, "used to be a boarding house, but the owner moved to California last year. It has been sitting empty ever since. Mrs. Henderson was saying just last week that she wishes someone would buy it and open a decent restaurant or tea house. The saloon serves food, but it is not exactly welcoming for families or respectable women." Zara studied the building with interest. It had good bones. She could see that even from outside, and the location on the main street was ideal. "How much would something like that cost?" "I could find out if you are interested," Lucas offered. The bank would have information about the asking price and what kind of loan terms might be available. They continued walking, and Zara found herself imagining what it would be like to actually live in Sweetwater, to be part of this community. The town was rough around the edges, still more frontier outpost than civilized settlement, but there was a vitality to it that appealed to her. People nodded greetings to Lucas as they passed, and several stopped to be introduced to Zara. their curiosity tempered with genuine friendliness. At the edge of town, Lucas guided her to a small rise that overlooked the valley where Sweetwater nestled against a bend in the creek that gave the town its name. From here, she could see the sprawl of buildings, the cattle pens at the far end, the church steeple rising above the other structures, and beyond it all, the vast open expanse of Texas stretching to the horizon. "It is beautiful," Zara said softly. "It is hard," Lucas corrected, but his tone was affectionate. "The summers are brutal, the winters can be harsh, and everything out here is trying to kill you in one way or another. Snakes, scorpions, drought, flash floods, outlaws. But yes, it is beautiful. It is real. What you build here, you build with your own hands, and no one can take that away from you." Zara turned to look at him, this cowboy who had appeared in her life at the moment of her greatest need like something out of a dime novel. "Is that why you stay? Why you have not left for somewhere easier?" "This is my home," Lucas said simply. "My parents built this ranch from nothing. My mother is buried here. My future is here. I cannot imagine being anywhere else." He paused, then added quietly, "But I would understand if you felt differently. You have already been through so much. No one would blame you for wanting to return to civilization, to an easier life." "What if I do not want an easier life?" Zara asked. "What if I want a real life, like you said? Something I build with my own hands?" Lucas's eyes searched her face. "Then I would say that Texas would be lucky to have you, that Sweetwater would be lucky to have you." He hesitated, then added even more quietly, "that I would be lucky to have you." Zara's breath caught. They stood there on the rise overlooking the town, the wind tugging at her skirts and his hat, the afternoon sun beating down with relentless heat. It felt like a moment balanced on the edge of something important, a decision that would shape the course of her entire future. "I am afraid," she heard herself whisper. "Of what?" Lucas asked gently. "Of everything. Of staying, of leaving, of trying to build something new and having it fall apart, of letting myself care about this place, about these people." She swallowed hard. "About you. I am afraid I will disappoint you, that I am not strong enough or brave enough for this kind of life." Lucas reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and gently cupped her face in his hand. His touch was warm and calloused and infinitely careful. "Zara, look at me." She met his eyes, those steady blue eyes that had been her anchor through the chaos of the past few days. "You traveled alone across half the country with dangerous men hunting you," Lucas said softly. "You protected evidence that could bring down powerful criminals, even though it put your own life at risk. You stood up to armed men yesterday and helped defend my home. You have been brave beyond measure. And whatever you decide to do next, wherever life takes you, I know you will face it with that same courage. But what if I am not brave? What if I was just running scared this whole time?" "Being scared and being brave are not opposites," Lucas said. "Real courage is being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. You have already proven you have that kind of strength, Zara. You have nothing to prove to me or anyone else." "I am afraid I will disappoint you," she whispered. Lucas's expression softened into something so tender it made her chest ache. He leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion. "Impossible," he said firmly. "You are already my everything." The words hung in the air between them, profound and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Zara stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "How can you say that? We have only known each other for 2 days." "I know," Lucas acknowledged. "And maybe it is too soon. Maybe I should wait months before saying such things. But I have learned that life on the frontier is uncertain. Tomorrow is not promised, and I would rather tell you the truth now than regret staying silent later." His thumb brushed gently across her cheekbone. "From the moment you stumbled into that saloon, bloody and brave and desperate, something in me recognized something in you. I cannot explain it better than that. But I know, Zara Garrett, that you are the woman I want to build a future with, if you will have me." Zara closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand against her face, the solid presence of him standing close. She thought about all the reasons she should say no, should protect her battered heart, should wait and be cautious. But then she thought about Samuel, about how he had always told her that life was too short to waste on fear. "I am afraid," she said again, opening her eyes to meet Lucas's gaze. "But I am tired of letting fear make my decisions for me. So yes, yes, you can court me properly. Yes, I will stay in Sweetwater and see if I can build a life here. And yes, I think you might already be my everything too, even though it is terrifying to admit it." The smile that spread across Lucas's face was like sunrise, brilliant and warm and full of promise. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Zara allowed herself to lean into his strength. For the first time in months, the future did not look like something to be feared but something to be embraced. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out over the town that would become her home. Finally, Lucas pulled back enough to look down at her, his expression playful. "So, Miss Garrett, since we are now officially courting, I should probably warn you that I have some terrible habits. I sing off-key when I am working. I am useless at anything requiring needlework. And I have been known to fall asleep in church when Reverend Walsh gets particularly long-winded." Zara laughed, the sound surprising her with its genuine joy. "Well, Mr. Whitmore, I should warn you that I am stubborn to a fault. I cannot cook anything more complicated than biscuits and stew without burning it, and I have an irrational fear of chickens. Chickens." Lucas repeated, his eyebrows rising. "They are unpredictable," Zara defended. "And mean. Have you seen their eyes? They look like tiny dinosaurs." Lucas threw back his head and laughed, a rich sound that seemed to bubble up from deep in his chest. "Well then, I suppose it is fortunate that Pa handles all the chicken-related duties on the ranch." They walked back to town hand in hand, a gesture that felt both innocent and significant. Several townspeople noticed and nodded approvingly, and Zara realized that in a small community like Sweetwater, news of their courtship would spread quickly. The thought should have made her nervous, but instead, she found it comforting. There was something to be said for a place where people paid attention, where your neighbors noticed if you were in trouble and stepped in to help. Over the following weeks, Zara settled into a new routine at the Whitmore Ranch. She helped James with the household tasks he had been managing alone since his wife's death, introducing some order to the kitchen, and mending the curtains that had been neglected for years. She also began learning the business side of running a cattle ranch, poring over ledgers and account books with a facility that impressed both Whitmore men. "You have a real head for numbers," James observed one evening as Zara showed him a new system she had devised for tracking cattle sales and expenses. "This is going to make everything much easier come tax time." But it was the time she spent with Lucas that made her truly feel at home. He taught her to ride properly, not just the basic skills she had learned as a girl, but the confident horsemanship required for life on a ranch. They would ride out in the early mornings when the heat was still bearable, Lucas pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the land and the people who had settled it. He was unfailingly patient with her, never making her feel foolish when she struggled with something new. When she admitted she was nervous about shooting after her experience defending the ranch, he spent hours with her at a makeshift range, teaching her to handle a rifle properly until her aim was true and steady. When she confessed that she did not know how to rope cattle, he showed her the techniques with quiet encouragement until she could manage a reasonable throw. In return, Zara shared stories of her own life, her childhood in St. Louis, her years keeping house for Samuel, her brother's dreams of justice and fairness. She told Lucas about the books she loved, the ideas that fascinated her, the secret ambition she had harbored to maybe one day open a lending library or bookshop. Sweetwater could use a library, Lucas said thoughtfully. Right now, if folks want books, they have to order them from back east or make do with whatever the general store happens to have in stock. They talked about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from profound to silly. Zara learned that Lucas had a dry sense of humor that emerged at unexpected moments, that he was surprisingly well-read for a cowboy, and that he had a deep respect for the land and the creatures that lived on it. She learned that his mother had been a school teacher before marrying his father, that she had insisted Lucas receive a proper education, and that she had died holding both her husband's and her son's hands, telling them that she was proud of the men they had become. In turn, Lucas learned about Zara's love of thunderstorms, her habit of humming while she worked, and her surprisingly sharp wit. He discovered that she could hold her own in any discussion about politics or current events, that she had strong opinions about women's suffrage and labor rights, and that she was not afraid to debate him when they disagreed. "You are not like any woman I have ever known," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. "Is that good or bad?" Zara asked. "Good," Lucas said emphatically. "Very good. You challenge me. You make me think about things differently. You are not content to just accept the way things are if you think they could be better." "Some people would call that being difficult," Zara pointed out. "Some people are idiots," Lucas replied, making her laugh. The summons to Austin arrived in late September. Marshal Thompson sent word that the trial of Marcus Brennan and his associates would begin in 2 weeks, and that Zara's testimony would be required. Lucas made arrangements immediately, organizing the trip with his typical efficiency. James insisted they take the wagon rather than go on horseback, arguing that it would be more comfortable for Zara and would allow them to carry proper supplies. The journey to Austin took 3 days of steady travel. Lucas was attentive without being overbearing, making sure Zara was comfortable and safe. They camped at night under the vast Texas sky, and Lucas taught her to identify constellations while the campfire crackled nearby. On the second night, when a sudden rainstorm forced them to take shelter under the wagon, they huddled together for warmth, and Zara found herself acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. "Zara," Lucas said softly into the darkness, his breath warm against her hair. "Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you ever regret staying? Do you ever wish you had gone back to St. Louis or headed further west to California?" Zara thought about the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss certain things about city life, the convenience of shops close by, the sound of church bells on Sunday morning. But no, I do not regret staying. This feels right in a way nothing else ever has." She felt him relax slightly beside her. "I am glad. I keep thinking about how easily I might never have met you. If you had arrived in Sweetwater on a different day, or if I had not been in that saloon at that exact moment. It seems impossible that something so important could hinge on such small chance." "Maybe it was not chance," Zara suggested. "Maybe some things are meant to be." Lucas's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I would like to believe that." They reached Austin on a humid afternoon, the state capital bustling with activity. Lucas secured rooms at a respectable hotel, making sure Zara had a comfortable place to stay while they waited for the trial to begin. Marshal Thompson met with them that evening to prepare Zara for her testimony, walking her through the questions she would be asked and explaining courtroom procedures. The trial itself was grueling. Zara spent 2 days on the witness stand, answering questions from both the prosecution and the defense attorneys. Marcus's lawyer tried to paint her as a hysterical woman seeking revenge for an imagined wrong, but Zara held firm, her testimony clear and unwavering. She had the documents to back up every claim she made, and Samuel's careful documentation proved impossible to refute. Lucas sat in the courtroom gallery every day, his steady presence giving her strength when the cross-examination grew particularly aggressive. When the defense attorney suggested that perhaps Zara herself had been involved in the fraud and was now trying to shift blame to innocent men, Lucas half rose from his seat, his face dark with anger. The judge had to call for order, and afterward, Lucas apologized for nearly causing a disruption. "Do not apologize," Zara said, touched by his protective instincts. "It means everything to me that you are here." On the 3rd day of the trial, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. Marcus Brennan and his associates were sentenced to hang for murder and to lengthy prison terms for fraud and conspiracy. As the sentences were read, Marcus turned to glare at Zara, his expression venomous with hatred. "This is not over," he mouthed silently, but it was over. Lucas made sure that additional charges were filed for the attack on the Whitmore ranch, ensuring that Marcus would face Texas justice in addition to federal prosecution. By the time all the legal proceedings concluded, there was no possibility of Marcus ever walking free again. That evening, as they prepared to begin the journey back to Sweetwater, Zara stood at the window of her hotel room and watched the sun set over Austin. She felt lighter somehow, as if a great weight she had been carrying for months had finally been lifted. Samuel's death had been avenged. Justice had been served. She could finally lay her brother to rest in her heart and move forward with her life. A knock at her door announced Lucas. When she opened it, he stood in the hallway looking uncharacteristically nervous, his hat in his hands. "Is everything all right?" Zara asked, concerned. "Yes. No, I mean." Lucas took a breath, collecting himself. "Can I come in? There is something I want to talk to you about." Zara stepped back, allowing him to enter. She left the door open for propriety's sake, aware that they were in a hotel and appearances mattered. Lucas paced to the window and then back, clearly wrestling with something. "Lucas, you are making me nervous," Zara said gently. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, I just—" He stopped, meeting her eyes. "We have been courting for nearly 2 months now. I know that is not very long by conventional standards, but Zara, every day I am more certain that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I love how strong you are, how smart, how brave. I love the way you laugh at my terrible jokes and the way you argue with me about politics. I love watching you with Pa, seeing how you have brought warmth and life back into our home. I love everything about you." Zara's heart was pounding. "Lucas." "I know I should wait longer," he continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know I should court you properly for at least a year and do this whole thing according to social conventions. But life is uncertain, and I have learned not to waste time when something important is at stake. So I am going to ask you now, even though it is too soon, even though we have not known each other very long. Zara Garrett, will you marry me?" The room seemed to spin. Zara pressed one hand against her chest, feeling her heart racing beneath her palm. Marriage. He was asking her to marry him. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to throw caution to the wind and embrace this chance at happiness. But another part, the cautious part that had kept her alive through 2 months of running from danger, held back. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. Lucas, what if you are wrong? What if you wake up in 6 months or a year and realize you made a mistake? What if I am not suited to be a rancher's wife? What if I disappoint you?" Lucas closed the distance between them in 2 strides, taking her hands in his. His grip was warm and firm, his eyes blazing with certainty. "You could never disappoint me," he said fiercely. "Zara, you are already everything I could ever want or need. Yes, we have not known each other long. Yes, there is still much we have to learn about one another. But I know the important things. I know you are loyal and brave and true. I know you face challenges head-on instead of running from them. I know you make me want to be a better man. That is enough. More than enough." "What if it is not?" Zara whispered. "What if I am not enough?" "Then we will figure it out together," Lucas said simply. "That is what marriage is, right? Two people choosing each other every day, working through whatever challenges come their way. I am not asking you to be perfect, Zara. I am just asking you to build a life with me, to take a chance on us." Zara looked into his earnest face, seeing the love and hope and vulnerability there. She thought about the past 2 months, about how comfortable she had become at the ranch, how right it felt to wake up each morning knowing Lucas would be nearby. She thought about the future she had started to imagine, running the ranch bookkeeping, maybe opening that library in Sweetwater, raising children who knew how to rope cattle and read Shakespeare with equal facility. She thought about Samuel and the last conversation they had shared before he died. He had made her promise to live, not just survive, to find happiness and love and meaning, to not let fear hold her back from the good things life had to offer. "Yes," she said, the word coming out barely louder than a breath. Then more strongly, "Yes, Lucas Whitmore, I will marry you." The joy that transformed his face was almost blinding. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around in a circle. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, a kiss full of promise and tenderness and barely restrained passion. It was Zara's first real kiss, and it left her dizzy and breathless and wanting more. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I promise I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this decision." "I know," Zara said, and she meant it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever difficulties they would face as they built their life together, she knew that Lucas would be beside her through all of it. And that was enough. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Sweetwater, with most of the town in attendance. Reverend Walsh performed the ceremony, and Zara wore a simple but beautiful dress that Mrs. Henderson and several other townswomen had helped her make. James stood as Lucas's best man, his arm still in a sling but healing well, and Mrs. Henderson served as Zara's matron of honor. As Zara walked down the aisle on James's good arm, she saw Lucas waiting for her at the altar, his face shining with love and happiness. She saw the townspeople who had welcomed her into their community, who had accepted her despite her unconventional arrival and the danger she had brought with her. She saw the future spreading out before her, full of possibility and promise. When Reverend Walsh asked if she took Lucas to be her lawfully wedded husband, Zara did not hesitate. "I do." And when Lucas slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, a simple gold band that James had kept safe for years, hoping his son would find someone worthy to wear it, Zara felt tears of joy slide down her cheeks. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Walsh announced, and Lucas did, thoroughly and enthusiastically, to the applause and cheers of the congregation. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and more food than seemed possible for such a small community to produce. There was music and dancing, and Lucas proved to be a surprisingly good dancer, guiding Zara through reels and waltzes with easy grace. As the sun began to set and the celebration continued around them, Lucas pulled Zara aside to a quiet spot near the barn. "Happy?" he asked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Incredibly," Zara confirmed. "I never imagined I could feel this way, safe and loved and hopeful." "Good," Lucas said, pulling her close. "Because this is just the beginning, Mrs. Whitmore. We have our whole lives ahead of us." And they did. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges, as they adjusted to living together and managing the ranch through drought and market fluctuations. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame. Zara discovered that she loved ranch life more than she ever expected. She took over complete management of the business side of the operation, implementing systems that increased efficiency and profitability. She also began working toward her dream of opening a library, organizing book drives and fundraising efforts with the help of other townswomen. Lucas proved to be an attentive and loving husband, never taking Zara for granted or expecting her to simply conform to traditional roles. He encouraged her interests and ambitions, proudly telling anyone who would listen about his wife's head for business and her plans to bring culture and learning to Sweetwater. Their first child, a son they named Samuel James, was born the following summer. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's blue eyes, and from the moment he entered the world squalling and red-faced, both Lucas and Zara were completely besotted. Watching Lucas cradle his newborn son, singing softly to him in that off-key voice he had warned her about, Zara felt her heart might burst with happiness. "He is perfect," Lucas murmured, looking up at Zara with wonder in his eyes. "You are perfect. I cannot believe how lucky I am." "We are lucky," Zara corrected, reaching out to touch the baby's tiny hand. "Both of us." 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Rose Elizabeth, who had her father's eyes but her mother's stubborn determination. She was barely walking before she was trying to climb everything in sight, giving her parents constant heart attacks and her grandfather James endless amusement. The library opened when Samuel was 3, occupying the renovated former boarding house that Zara and Lucas had purchased together. It quickly became the heart of the community, a place where children came for lessons, where ranchers stopped to read newspapers and discuss current events, where lonely widows found companionship and immigrants practiced their English. Zara ran it with the same efficiency she brought to the ranch accounts, and it became one of her greatest sources of pride. Through it all, Lucas remained her anchor and her partner. They still took early morning rides together when they could, stealing moments of quiet before the day's work began. They still debated politics and philosophy on the porch in the evenings, now with children playing at their feet. They still found ways to make each other laugh, to surprise each other, to choose each other day after day. On their 10th anniversary, Lucas took Zara back to the spot on the rise overlooking Sweetwater where he had first kissed her forehead, and told her she was his everything. The town had grown considerably in the decade since Zara's arrival, with new buildings and businesses springing up along the main street. The Whitmore Ranch had prospered as well, expanding their herd and their land holdings. "You remember standing here that day?" Lucas asked, wrapping his arms around Zara from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. "When you told me you were afraid of disappointing me." "I remember," Zara said softly, leaning back against his solid warmth. "I was so scared of everything back then. And now?" Zara thought about the life they had built together, the children they were raising, the community they were part of, the love that had only deepened with time. "Now I am still scared sometimes," she admitted. "Scared something will happen to you or the children. Scared that somehow this happiness will be taken away, but I am not afraid of disappointing you anymore. You have shown me every day for 10 years that I am enough. More than enough." Lucas turned her in his arms to face him, his blue eyes as warm and loving as they had been on their wedding day. "You are my everything, Zara Whitmore. You always have been, from the moment you stumbled into that saloon, and you always will be." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and Zara kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and joy in her heart. When they finally pulled apart, she smiled up at him. "And you are mine," she said, "my everything and more." They stood there together as the sun set over Sweetwater. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love despite fear, who had built something real and lasting from the ashes of tragedy. Below them, the town lights began to twinkle on as evening fell, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed and a train whistle sounded. It was not the life Zara had imagined for herself when she fled St. Louis with her brother's dying wishes and a satchel full of dangerous documents. It was infinitely better. It was home. It was love. It was everything she had never dared to dream of, made real by the cowboy who had stepped between her and danger all those years ago, who had seen her fear and met it with faith, who had promised her that disappointment was impossible. And he had been right. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows as all lives do. James Whitmore passed peacefully in his sleep when Samuel was 10 and Rose was 8, leaving the ranch fully in Lucas and Zara's capable hands. They mourned him deeply, but took comfort in knowing he had lived to see his grandchildren, and to know his son was happy and settled. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy with his mother's love of books and his father's steady reliability. He spent hours in the library, reading everything he could get his hands on, and eventually decided to study law, inspired by his namesake uncle's pursuit of justice. Rose was wilder, more adventurous, insisting on learning to rope and ride as well as any ranch hand. She had her parents' combined stubbornness and could outwit both of them before she was 12. 2 more children followed, twin boys named Matthew and Daniel, who were alternately their parents' greatest joy and biggest challenge. They got into constant mischief, playing pranks on ranch hands and sneaking away to explore when they were supposed to be doing chores. But they were also fiercely loyal to each other and to their family, and watching them grow up filled Lucas and Zara's home with laughter and chaos in equal measure. The library continued to thrive, expanding to include regular reading groups and educational programs. Zara's dream of bringing culture and learning to Sweetwater had become reality beyond anything she had originally imagined. She hired a young woman named Clara to help manage the day-to-day operations, giving Zara more time to spend with her growing family while still maintaining her involvement in the community projects she loved. Lucas aged gracefully, his dark hair gaining threads of silver at the temples, his face gaining character lines from years of squinting into the Texas sun. But he was still strong and vital, still capable of working a full day on the ranch, still the man Zara had fallen in love with all those years ago. If anything, she loved him more with each passing year as they accumulated shared history and memories, and inside jokes that no one else would understand. They faced challenges, of course. There were drought years when the cattle struggled and money was tight. There were illnesses, the worst being when Rose contracted scarlet fever at age 14 and hovered near death for 3 terrifying days before finally turning the corner toward recovery. There were disagreements and arguments, times when they frustrated each other or struggled to see eye to eye on important decisions, but they always came back to each other, always talked through their problems, always chose their partnership over their individual pride. And through it all, The foundation of love and respect they had built in those early days remained unshakable. On their 25th anniversary, their children organized a celebration that brought together friends and family from across Texas. Samuel was home from law school, tall and handsome in his formal suit. Rose, now 23 and engaged to a young veterinarian who had recently settled in Sweetwater, helped organize the entire event with her characteristic energy and efficiency. The twins, 17 and on the verge of heading off to college themselves, served as hosts, making sure everyone had food and drink. As Zara looked around at the crowded celebration, at the life she and Lucas had built together, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about the frightened young woman who had stumbled into Sweetwater 25 years ago, convinced she had nothing left to live for, and marveled at how much had changed. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, sliding an arm around her waist as they stood at the edge of the festivities. "About how far we have come," Zara said, leaning into his familiar warmth. "About how none of this would exist if you had not stepped between me and danger that day in the saloon." "I think we were always meant to find each other," Lucas said, "one way or another." "Do you really believe that?" "I do," he said firmly. "Some things are just meant to be, like us." Their children gave speeches, embarrassing and heartfelt in turn. Samuel talked about growing up watching his parents work together as true partners, how they had taught him that love was as much about respect and communication as it was about romance. Rose made everyone laugh with stories of her parents' legendary stubbornness, and how family arguments often ended with both of them being right, because they were too similar to admit defeat. The twins presented their parents with a hand-tooled leather photo album they had worked on together, filled with pictures and memories spanning 25 years. When it was Lucas's turn to speak, he stood with Zara's hand clasped firmly in his and looked out at the gathered crowd. "25 years ago, I made the best decision of my life when I married this woman. Zara has been my partner in every sense of the word. She has made me a better man, a better father, a better rancher. She has brought intelligence and grace and determination to everything she touches. Our children are who they are because of her strength and wisdom. Our ranch thrives because of her business acumen. Our community is richer because of her vision and generosity." He turned to face Zara directly, his eyes shining with emotion. "On the day I asked you to marry me, you were afraid you would disappoint me. You were wrong then, and you would be wrong now. You have exceeded every dream, surpassed every hope. You are still my everything, Zara Whitmore. You always will be." Zara felt tears streaming down her face, not caring who saw them. "And you are mine," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing me, for believing in me, for loving me even when I could not love myself. Thank you for every moment of these 25 years." They kissed to applause and cheers from their family and friends, and Zara felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The years continued their steady march forward. Rose married her veterinarian and gave Lucas and Zara their first grandchildren, twin girls who were as wild and adventurous as their mother. Samuel finished law school and opened a practice in Austin, but came home regularly, eventually bringing a brilliant young attorney named Margaret who fit seamlessly into the Whitmore family. The twins, after college, returned to help run the ranch, ensuring that the family legacy would continue into the next generation. Lucas and Zara gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, content to let their children take over while they enjoyed a slower pace of life. They spent their mornings on the porch with coffee, watching the sunrise over the land they had worked so hard to build. They took long rides together, no longer racing but simply enjoying each other's company and the beauty of the Texas landscape. They spoiled their grandchildren shamelessly and told them stories about the old days, about how Grandma Zara had arrived in Sweetwater running from danger, and how Grandpa Lucas had taken one look at her and known she was special. On their 40th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered again, this time at the ranch house. Lucas and Zara were older now, their hair completely gray, their bodies not quite as spry as they once were. But the love in their eyes when they looked at each other was as bright and steady as ever. 40 years, Lucas mused as they stood together on the porch after everyone else had gone to bed. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I first saw you in that saloon. Other times it feels like I have known you my entire life. Both things are true, Zara said, threading her fingers through his. Every moment with you has been precious, and yet there has never been enough time. I could have 40 more years with you and it still would not be enough. Then I guess we had better make the most of whatever time we have left, Lucas said, pulling her close for a gentle kiss. They stood together in the moonlight, surrounded by the land they had made their own, the family they had created, the legacy they would leave behind. And Zara knew, with absolute certainty, that she had made the right choice all those years ago when she chose to stay in Sweetwater, to trust in love despite her fears, to build a life with the cowboy who had promised her that disappointment was impossible. He had been right then. He was still right now, and he would be right for whatever days remained to them, because love, real love, the kind that weathered all storms and endured all trials, was impossible to disappoint. It simply grew stronger, deeper, more precious with each passing year. And that was exactly what Zara and Lucas had built together, from that first desperate day to this peaceful evening, across 40 years of partnership and devotion. Their story was not one of fairy tale perfection. It was better than that. It was real. It was earned. It was true. And it was, in every way that mattered, a triumph of hope over fear, of love over loneliness, of building something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. As they stood together under the vast Texas sky, surrounded by the life they had created, Zara leaned her head against Lucas's shoulder and smiled. She had been so afraid, all those years ago, of disappointing this good man who had offered her safety and love. But he had been right to dismiss her fears. She had not disappointed him. She had loved him, partnered with him, built a life with him that was rich and full and meaningful. And that, Zara thought as sleep began to claim her, was more than enough. It was everything.